All right, everybody. Time's afoot here. I'm Frank Schwartz. I'm kind of moderating here, and I'm going to just sort of keep the session going along on time here. Thank you all for coming. All our alumni guests who we saved chairs for just went, they disappeared, right? So, in general, we have a couple here left. But thank you for attending. You can see we have videos here that are operating here, and we're going to hopefully snip this together. And so if colleagues have missed this talk, there should be time to see it on that. So the way this is going to work, we have 4 panelists here, all alumni here of Ohio State that cover the kind of the waterfront of job descriptions. I'm going to give them like 10 minutes to give a presentation. If they run if they finish, and we can move on. And then as at the end of all this, we can take questions and if you have specific questions. The reason we're going to just go through them one after another without questions is that it aids the videography, right? So make more sense just to ask questions as they come up. But in any case, our first speaker here is Mike Gibson.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming, and I was happy to be able to take part in this career discussion. I'm a BS in '89 from Ohio State. I was a career undergrad. My first quarter at Ohio State was September of 1981, so it took a while to get through that. I was in the military at the time. The luxury of that extended undergrad experience was I got to take a lot of classes because I had partial quarters and things like that, and would fill in and take extras and take summer courses and things, and so it went pretty well. I got to take a lot. So my perspective looking at the program now is, how do we get students to find their way into more of the curriculum, go a little deeper than maybe some of the courses and the tracks that is, and try to make the most of it, because time is becoming less and less, especially under the semester framework. You guys know the drill, right? So I came into school at Ohio State as a pre-med major, so I really, in retrospect, had no idea what I was going to do, because it turned out after my first quarter I wasn't going to do med. So took an entry-level class. Back then it was 100 point something. Old Dr. Fuller was my my professor. Loved it. I'd always been a sort of a hobbyist. Geology. I grew up in the Great Lakes region, northern Michigan. Rocks. Geologic processes. How the heck is coal made? These are all things as a kid I was just sort of curious about, and it clicked real fast for me once I started to take some coursework in school. I had nothing in high school that would have steered me that way. There's a lot more of that now, especially some in the environmental science track. So then, there I was, went through my major, loved it, established a great group of friends, really. And back then it was even more, once you're in the track, it was geology and mineralogy, right? So everybody's in it once. Whoever comes in that September or August follows each other all the way through the program, and they may take some different courses here and there, but back then it was a lot more condensed and track based and single track based. So then graduated '89. Was lucky enough to get a research position for Dr. Wilson, who had her first field season in Antarctica back then. So fall of '89, we shipped off to New Zealand and ultimately to McMurdo Station. Worked remotely for 2 months in the field. Thought about grad school, thought about making money. I was getting married in 1990. Got back, went to work. So I started with a company here in town. And my focus as an undergrad, backing up for a second, was structural geology. I was all about structural geology. Had no idea what I was going to do with it. The petroleum boom of the 80s was subsiding, to say the least, and there really were no jobs when I graduated with my bachelor's degree. So went to work, found a great job at a company in town, Egan and Associates, with an AEAGON, and they're all environmental, groundwater focused. I really came in with not a lot of focus in any of that. And so, but I was a good core geologist with a lot of field experience at that point. And then I learned the rest on the job, right? So I went through as a pretty capable field geologist to ultimately become a pretty capable hydrogeologist. And most of that hydro was on the job. One of the things and now I'm president of that company. So 33 years later, it's my company, and we hire aggressively through the OSU pipeline. I've gotten to know a lot of students over the years, and we just hired 2 in the last 3 weeks that are going to start. One graduate student, Lauren Decker, and an undergrad, Ian Gillis, who are starting here in a couple weeks. So, and now, coming into that, the big question for today is going to be, what kind of things do you all need to be thinking about as undergrads or as graduate students as you get deeper into your majors or get deeper into your research, and what else can you maybe do to get ready for the next step? And so I think that's what I'm happy to help with. And if it's not here today, anytime, always feel free to track me down, and I can talk whenever needed. So that's what I've got. I think that's
Okay,
about my
yeah,
10 minutes.
Thanks very much, Mike. As I said, we'll just kind of move on. Next talking is going to be Sandy Eberts. And go ahead, Sandy.
Hi, I'm Sandy Eberts. I graduated with a bachelor's in geology in 1983 and then a master's in hydrogeology in 1987. I thought I was going to come out and work in oil in 83, but there were no jobs. And so it's like, okay, plan B. And so you'll find your career just unfolds, right? You have to prepare yourself, but you can't really lay things out exactly. So, I went on into school, and it turned out that the U.S. Geological Survey, where I'm currently employed, has a local office in Water, and they had an adjunct professor here teaching a graduate class. I had gone on to graduate school. I asked the department, can I TA that class? I want to learn a little bit more about, what the USGS has to do. And I TA'd the class, and I ended up working, part-time for the USGS in those years, and ended up converting full-time. I've been with the U.S. Geological Survey now locally for 38 years. It's been a fantastic career. I started with the local office here, but I worked for Northeast Region. I've worked for headquarters. I'm still with headquarters. And I've been to almost all 50 states with my career without having to move, which was, great because my husband has a local business. And I'm currently head of the research division for water. We are focused on water quantity, quality, and use, and we're trying to put together forecasts of water availability daily for the whole country. It's a very big undertaking, and we envision, a number of years down the road, people, turn on the news to get today's weather. They'll be turning on the news to get today's water forecast. So that's what we're working on. I got into geology, just like Mike. I did not start in geology. I didn't come out of high school thinking, I'm going to be a geologist. I knew something about geology. I did a 7th grade science fair on geology, but we had no earth science in high school in the day. I started in architecture, and I took that intro geology class, and I loved it. What sold me on it was I got to go to field camp. I hadn't been out west, and that was really a draw to me, right? I mean, young people really don't know, exactly what they want. Some people do. And I just switched majors. I remember telling my parents, I'm going to switch into geology, and they didn't know what that was going to look like either, but they were very supportive. It's been a great choice. One of my favorite memories here was really being part of a very active geology club. The undergraduate club was very active. We did all of our spring break trips together. We loaded up in the department vans. We traveled around collecting rocks and going caving, and just becoming very good friends. I'm still good friends with many of the people I went to school with. They've all had successful careers. So OSU really set me up for success. Again, I found a job while I was still a student for the government, because the U.S. Geological Survey is federal. The best time to get a job is while you're still a student. We have a lot of different pathways to hire students, fewer pathways to hire people who are out of school for more than a year. So if you're interested, USA Jobs is a place that you want to monitor for potential opportunity. The U.S. Geological Survey, and I didn't know this at the time either. I mean, I was so surprised there was a USGS office here in Columbus at the time. We have offices in every single state, and those are largely water offices, but we have ecosystems, we have energy and mineral offices, we've got mapping, we cover the whole gamut, but the water presence is the largest presence across the landscape. So some of the things that I did when I first started at the USGS, I started on just some countywide water resource assessments, measuring groundwater levels, mapping, aquifer water tables, and monitoring water quality. I moved on to being a modeler for a big regional 5-state aquifer assessment. And from there, I became a liaison from the USGS to the U.S. Air Force for cleanup of their weapons facilities. And I got into, some plume assessments and such. But even for the work for the Air Force, a lot of consultants were doing very local scale, cleanup work. The USGS brought that geologic and hydrologic framework that everybody else could, hang their work onto. So really understanding, your basic geology is very valuable. From there, I led a number of big teams who were looking at water quality and how contaminants get into drinking water supplies. And I finally moved completely into management, and now I'm the director for our Earth System Processes Research Division for all of USGS. I think that's all I have.
Okay, thanks, Andy. Dave?
Yeah, my name's Dave Zolkowski. I'm a geodesist, not a geologist. I am a geodesist. So I see that most of the people here are, probably all of the people here are in the part of the geology. So I'm a little bit different than most. I got my master's degree in geodetic science in 1979. But I first started with geodesy and surveying in 1970s and 74 when I went to Syracuse University at the School of Environmental Science and Forestry. And I just fell in love with the surveying aspect of it, mostly because it was something you did outdoors, and I liked the outdoors and so. But I loved it, and I thought it was just great. It was fun to do. So when I graduated from Syracuse, I got a job with the National Geodetic Survey. And I was one of the few, when they hired me, that understood what geodesy was. Many of the people that they actually hired didn't even know what it was. They were mathematicians, and some physicists, and other ones are physical scientists, and some geologists. They hired all sorts of different people. So just because you see a name like the National Geodetic Survey doesn't mean that they're not interested in some of the expertise that you have. And NGS is involved with NOAA. So there they have a wide range of it, especially with the environmental stuff. But I was fortunate. I went to work for the National Geodetic Survey, the federal government, with things that just as she was talking about hiring students and so forth, NGS had the same thing. But we were doing major programs, readjusting networks, geodetic networks. So the government asked me, would you want to go back to school? We'll pay your salary, we'll give you per diem, we'll help you move. And you can go for a year, well, 15 months that they said. And you can go take classes. And they didn't pay for a degree. They said, we can't really give for a degree, but you take all the classes you want. You get your degree, it's fine. So I did my master's program, and I did it in 18 months, or 15 months, actually. But I didn't have to work. I was being paid full time, but that's a government benefit. But not when I went back to work, I owed them 3 months for every month that they gave me. But I worked there for 35 years. I ended up being the director of the National Geodetic Survey before I retired. And I retired in 2009, so I've been retired for 13 years. I still do a lot of work and fun stuff, that all the things I want to do. But inside NOAA itself, there's a lot of different avenues for people that aren't geodesists, although I would encourage everybody to look into what geodesy is about, because that's what I love. And some of my experiences, I don't know if you're familiar with VLBI, Very Long Baseline Interferometry, these big old telescopes that are out there. You know, some of the things are 30, 40 feet wide. I got to climb on top of those because we were measuring and trying to figure out how to get to the center of mass of it, the rotation. I touched the top of the Washington Monument, the tip, on the outside, by the way, the tip. Maybe about 10 people have done that, maybe 15, but no more. When they had the scaffold and they were fixing it, we wanted to position the top. So they said, yeah, you can go ahead. So we built some nice adapters, put it up there, 555 feet in the air. You can't imagine what the view of that is. I was actually on the outside of the Washington Monument before I was ever on the inside of it. Eventually, I did get inside and get up top. But point being, those are a lot of the things. I got to climb on container ship because we were trying to position them, trying to understand where is the keel relative to the bottom of the bathymetry. Because they were scraping. So how much do you dredge? So we were putting receivers on top of these container ships. So I got to climb all over this and put them in containers, and just exciting. It's just amazing kind of activities. And talking about NOAA, environmental, I've always been an environmental person. I love the outdoors, but I also love the environment, trying to work with the environment. And inside NOAA, they have coastal zone managers, and they plant these seagrass to help protect the coastal erosion and so forth. So I started planting seagrass with this group and explaining what geodesy was about. And we developed these actually made a little go-kart with positioning so they could profile where they were putting the seagrass. Because some seagrass can take so much water, some can't be buried for only a certain amount of time. So they needed to know what the actual elevation of it relative to the water level. So we got to do that. But my point being is that as a geodesist, I was interested in trying to collaborate with other groups to be able to cross-pollinate the positioning aspect. That's what I do. I love positioning. And that's, to me, you have a phone, you know where you are. But without geodesy, you wouldn't have that. And so every time you pick up your phone and you see where you're going and you're walking down the road, think of geodesy. Because without that, you wouldn't be able to do that. There's a lot of opportunities out there, too, for people that understand this. National Geodetic Survey, the NGA, the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, Google Earth needs people that this kind of stuff, the flying drones, and you'll probably get to doing some drone work yourself, but knowing where that drone is, the location, what it's picking, what is it taking, being able to map an area using a drone, driverless vehicles. My first time I saw a driverless vehicle was actually almost 20 years ago now, and it was out in Nevada. I was on a transportation research board, and all they had with this driverless vehicle going around this track, they didn't care about the position of the vehicle. That's what I was interested in. They were running these cars over and over asphalt because they were trying to determine the length of time the asphalt, how it would wear or something. But they were doing driverless vehicles. That involved geodesy, being able to know where you are. You had to keep that vehicle going around and around. OSU really helped me when I was here a couple ways. One is obviously gave me the knowledge and education that I needed to get back into the National Geodetic Survey, and gave me the confidence and the experience and confidence to be able to excel and believe in myself. And I rose all the way to the top, became the director of the agency. And the other thing is my relationship with individuals. I met a lot of people from around the world in the geodesy program at that time in 1979. They're from everywhere. And I still have some of those relationships from these individuals that now are back in their own countries, back in the African nations, many from the European nations or countries. So to me, all of that is something that I live with forever. I'm 70 years old now, and I'm still enjoying geodesy. Basically, been involved for 50 years. So, closing comments. Find what you love. Make sure you get a job that you really enjoy. And then it's not a job. It's just fun. Anyways, that's me.
Thanks, Dave. Our last speaker is Claire Mondro.
Hi, I'm Claire, like you said, and so I graduated from Ohio State in 2010 with a Bachelor's of Science in Geology and then also a BA in English. I did not start as a geologist. I started as a chemistry major freshman year, and I took 1 quarter of chemistry. We were still in quarters then. Decided that I'd didn't like learning about things that I couldn't see. So I went through the course catalog and read all the descriptions and decided geology sounded cool. Partly for the, get to do science outside part, but also just because it was the study of literally the world around us. And I wanted to know how the world worked and how the systems interacted, and that was geology. So I found my home here. And then I added an English degree kind of for fun. But that was a huge advantage. Learning how to write well and communicate well has been a huge advantage all the way through my career. The first impression a lot of people have of you throughout your career is writing, whether it's an email or a cover letter. So being able to write well, big advantage. At Ohio State, my favorite part of geology here was field camp. That really got me interested in the pieces that I would carry through later, and mostly for kind of the big picture aspect of it. The complex systems part is always what's really interested me, and I found all the way through that geology in the real world is always more complicated than it looks in your data or in the lab or in models. There's always another scale layer of complexity that it's really hard to see until you actually go out and find it. And then I also did undergrad research here. So I worked with Dr. Ann Carey for an undergrad thesis, and that was a really big help as well. And I actually didn't think about grad school until I think the end of my junior year, and then finally a couple professors were like, hey, you should consider grad school. And I had never considered that as an option before. I know now everybody thinks that you have to know way ahead of time where you're going after undergrad, and that's just not true. So I went on and did a master's at Penn State. I was doing structure and tectonics, so I was researching the mountain building history of the island of Taiwan, looking at strain indicators in thin sections to recreate the stress fields in the mountain range. From Penn State, I got recruited to the oil industry in an oil boom. They were hiring like crazy then. So I went to work for Chevron for about 5 years as an exploration geologist, and I loved the exploration geology. The oil industry itself was not where I wanted to spend my whole career, and I really missed the community of science. In industry, everything is very proprietary, everything's very secretive because it's all business advantages. So I was doing really exciting work, and I couldn't show anyone except for my team and my supervisors. And I missed that part of research. And then also exploration geology in the oil industry has been downsizing recently, even before the oil price crash in 2015 and everything. Currently, oil industry is a lot more focused on the engineering side and the modeling side, because a lot of the exploration has already been done. We've discovered plenty of oil, we just haven't drilled it all. So I wanted to do the exploration part. What I was working on was really exciting, and they kept downsizing those teams. And then the oil price crashed, all my friends started getting laid off. I decided I didn't want to live in Houston for 30 years, and I was looking for the next thing. So I went from Chevron. I was doing like satellite-based geologic mapping in the Middle East, which was very cool. And that wasn't gonna last forever. And I wanted to stick with that. I wanted the complex systems, the big picture. So I made the jump into planetary geology out of the oil industry, which is not a very common path at all. And I went back to get a PhD at University of Tennessee in planetary surface processes and remote sensing. So I was working on Mars, and then also on some Earth analogs, so systems and features on Earth, specifically alluvial fans that we also see on Mars. And I was doing some field work out in like Death Valley area, looking at alluvial fans, doing some drone mapping, doing some very classic sedimentology, stratigraphy, and then applying that to similar systems on Mars. I worked on the Opportunity rover on Mars for a very brief amount of time before it died in a dust storm, and kept doing other Mars remote sensing work through my PhD. I graduated with that about a year ago, and now I'm a postdoc at Caltech, and I'm working with the Curiosity rover science team. So I'm working with the day-to-day operations of the rover team, helping to decide what targets we're going to image, what data we want to get down from the rover, and then I'm developing my own research related to the rover data as well. And so the exciting thing about that is that I'm doing a little bit of everything. I've done a little bit of everything all the way through, from my master's to oil industry to everything else. And now I'm doing sedimentology on Mars, sedimentology of the crater fill that we're seeing with the rover. I'm doing some structure work, some analysis of fracture patterns, and the initiation and origin of these fracture systems. I'm doing some more complicated, like interdisciplinary work, trying to update the models that we have of the filling of the crater with sedimentary material and then everything that happens during crater fill. So entire basically depositional and burial history of the crater and all the different pieces that go into that, the depositional systems, the groundwater story, the alteration, everything else. So it's a piece of everything, which is what I liked from the beginning. And it's been really exciting, and there's a lot of new work to do there. There's a lot of new opportunities, and planetary it took me, I haven't counted the number of years, it took me a while to figure out what I wanted to do with geology from when I started freshman year of undergrad. And I think I finally found my home in planetary research.
By far the coolest job on the panel.
So, yeah, it's been fun. And it's the interesting thing about planetary geology is the NASA missions sound like very elite. Like NASA is, it feels very hard to get to. And in my experience, it definitely takes a successful career path, an academic path, but it's no more difficult to get involved in than any other academic path that takes you to a successful career. So if you're, a good student and have good experience and keep following your interests, the people that I work with on the rover team, a lot of them are grad students, and they're doing that work as part of their grad degree. So I wouldn't say it's easy to get involved in, but it's not as hard as it sounds. So one piece with that, when I was here at field camp, our field camp professor at the time gave us a piece of wisdom that has evolved over the years. But he said, the best geologist is the one that's seen the most rocks. And it's not quite rocks anymore because so much of geology is other systems and other pieces. But I still think that holds really true. The best geologist is the one who's seen the most geology. So getting that interdisciplinary view has really helped me. Getting experience in different disciplines, different fields has really helped me. And so for an example, some of the rover stuff from last fall, we came across a really interesting geologic unit that it didn't look like what we expected. And came up to this unit and had to reevaluate our whole interpretation of it. And within 10 minutes, 4 different people had dropped into the chat, oh, I think it looks really similar to this one field site I was at 10 years ago. Let me go grab a photo and share it. And we had 4 or 5 different examples of what people had seen in different environments in different places that looked similar that we used to start building our models and building our interpretation. So that was pretty cool. All right.
Okay, great. Thanks, panel, for your introductions and discussions. We're going to open the session for questions now from the audience, and we hope that you'll take advantage of all the long expertise of the panel. So if you could direct your question to specific individuals or the panel in general. Also, if we could ask someone to repeat the question up here, just so the question gets there, it saves us avoiding jogging the microphone around in the crowd, right? So repeat the question, but go ahead. I'm looking for great participation here from our students. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Miranda Manross. I am the president of the Geology Club here, the Undergrad Geology Club. This is Daniel, Aubrey, and Jack. These are our executive officers. And I want to direct this to you, but I want to open it up to everybody as well. We are kind of fresh this semester. COVID hit, things got torn down, and so there wasn't anything to jump into, and so we decided to create one. And there have been a lot of hurdles to come over and absolutely everything. We are really trying to get everything from the ground up. And so I would just like advice or anything that you guys have that really helped you when you were in our shoes. What helped the best during your clubs or any experiences that you've had to go forwards?
I think, and I mentioned this earlier for us, well, the question was what helped, the clubs while we were here at Ohio State. And I think what helped us was that ability to travel together, to do some, spring break trips, go, rock collecting or like I said, caving. That built community and that brought people into the club. And we just had a great time. And we always camped, it was always, something economical where everybody could participate. Yeah. And then I started with the geology club, I guess, my sophomore year. So by the time I went to field camp, they were some of the same people I traveled out to field camp with and spent my summer with, So again, a lot of great friendships. I went on the field camp reunion trip to Utah last summer, and two of the women I graduated with, we hadn't seen each other since school. We went to field camp together 40 years ago last summer, and we met up and spent the week together. So yeah, those relationships you build in the club and just having activities, that really brings people in.
Well, and one thing that, I agree with that, the activities, but and diversity from your club. In other words, your geology, and you got that interest. But what can you bring else into it? Like in case when we were at Geodesy, now I had this is back in 78, 79, but we had a very diverse group from everybody around the world. And one of the things that we always did is we got together, but you had food from different parts of the world, and then there was the interaction and understanding their culture. So in many cases, you may have that within your own club, but if you don't, go out to a different club, totally different, doesn't have to be the geology, just a different club, and see if there's some cross-pollination and bring two clubs together to just say, hey, tell us what you guys are doing, and the other one, you tell that, and maybe you do some things with food. Now, I gotta admit, my group was a little bit older than what you guys were, so cooking and doing all that stuff was more of a natural thing. I'm not sure it is for you all, but you could still come together and talk to each other and maybe give some short presentations, because that's a good practice too at your level of presenting what you're doing to some non-geologists. Anyways, that was one of the things that I felt that was just of interest. And I like people, so I always like to learn from people and just meet other people. But anyways, I think that would be one way to grow the group. Or it changes the dynamics, of course, but that's what you want.
Yeah, thank you. That's very exciting.
I'd reiterate the traveling together, getting to know each other, but also what helped me was feeling like a part of the department very early in my undergrad career. And I think that really helped me take full advantage of the department by the time I was a junior, senior, because I already felt like a part of it. I knew the building, I knew the other people, other students and faculty were familiar. So I don't know what the setup and the demographic is, but definitely reaching out to or involving or making sure the sophomore new major people are included as well, because that really helps out.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Sorry.
And we also had, maybe you do this, we had geology club t-shirts and, we had design competitions and all that. So it forms a sense of identity.
Yeah,
And-
we just actually yesterday, our stickers came in.
At
So
stickers.
We're starting to get there.
Yeah,
Yes.
that really helps a lot.
Yeah.
It's building up the funds to get that initial
Yeah.
merchandise has been
Yeah.
one of our main hurdles as of now.
Yeah.
Over here.
Yeah, this is more for Mike and Sandy. When you are looking to hire and you are given a resume, do you tend to look for more higher education or previous industry experience?
I can answer that first. First thing we start off with is a need, and it's sometimes it's more entry level, technician level, that where we hire only bachelor's degrees or higher in our firm, and we'll first look at the general breadth of what your curriculum's been, what your focus has been, what kind of research you've done, if it's senior thesis or whatever, and then more than anything, we want to talk to you. We want to hear you sort of talk the jargon. We want to hear your comprehension of what you've done so far. We like to see, field camp, but we don't require that you went to field camp. You know what I mean? So we find things that we think that can fit. For us, it's a little bit holistic. It's personality. It's again, the ability to express an opinion or express yourselves. And then we do it as a collective and with a group. So it's sort of a panel that you are interviewed by. And ultimately, what we're trying to imagine is building you beyond, whatever you're coming out with. If it's a bachelor's degree, if it's a master's degree, we typically don't hire PhDs. And then it's really about seeing into the future, and then trying to, at this level, help you build to that and fill in some of these gaps that you might have. Get you to think outside of the track concept a little bit, look at the certificate concept a little bit. Imagine the fact that you're maybe not going to end up tomorrow where you think you are today, right? So it's that was my story, right? I thought I was going to be, petroleum geology, in the oil fields, structural geology. It was all about that. And as I got closer to my degree, it was very clear that was not going to happen. And of course, it didn't happen. So always have a plan B in mind. And plan Bs in your world are oftentimes, you don't know it now, but you may end up in an environmental track, in a consulting track, and hydrogeology is a great tool to have in your back pocket. Just some basic familiarity. Take hydro, take water resources, things like that, because very often that's going to be where you end up. Think about geochemistry, contaminant fate and transport. Mm-hmm. Those are very, in the consulting world, that's a lot of the kind of stuff you get into. And again, you don't need to be an expert at it per se. You just need to have familiarity. Been working with the school to try to build in the hydro module in the field camp, for example. Put the unconsolidated aquifers on the cross sections, across the valleys in central Utah. You don't have to go a deep dive into hydrogeology, but just, hey, there's an aquifer there. Let's capture it in the kind of work we're doing, which may be more, physical geology, general, mapping skills, things like that at field camp, and just think outside the box a little bit, try to anticipate maybe a change in track as you get closer, and utilize your resources, utilize these kind of things. Mm-hmm. Get a hold of me, get a hold of Sandy, get a hold of anybody on the panel, and try to, make relationships, learn about, next steps for, your curriculum or, things along those lines.
And I would say for the federal government and the U.S. Geological Survey more specifically, we'll hire bachelor's, master's, and PhDs, and you'll have different careers depending on your level of education. If you come in with a bachelor's degree, you're going to often be doing a lot of field work, and a lot of people like that outdoor aspect, collecting a lot of data, processing data, and probably working on some bigger, applied science projects. If you're master's, you might be working to lead some of those interpretive studies, also doing some field work. But if you want to be doing research and doing a lot of publication of scientific literature, you're going to have a PhD. And for us in the water resources within USGS, a lot of these water science centers that I mentioned are all across the country. A lot of bachelor's and master's candidates end up in those offices. For headquarters, we're primarily PhDs. But the one nice thing about USGS and, publishing, unlike some of the other federal agencies, you always publish under your own name. And that's not typical. If you work for EPA, which is also a great agency, you publish in an EPA document. Even the U.S. Geological Survey publications, not just the scientific literature, you always publish under your own name. I don't know. I always liked that.
And one thing, once again, National Geological Survey is all about geodesy, but NOAA itself is an environmental agency. So it involves a lot more than that. And one of the things that I think that is important, when we get applications the top three, they're like the same. It's like, you're juggling around and they're very, very similar. So how do you discern the differences? And I would look myself as, how do the people, what did they do on the outside? Not so much some of your technical things, because you get applications and the top three are going to be technically almost equivalent. You can't decide. So to me, I look at, well, what kind of clubs were they in? What kind of relationships did they make? What type of, things did they do on the outside? So never discount some of those things when you're trying to write what you did. I was involved with the geology club, and maybe president of the geology club. It shows a leadership type thing. So showing your leadership, and even outside type things that you do, Meals on Wheels. Okay, that's the only thing I thought about, because my daughter, who's 47 years old, by the way, is doing that now herself. And the reason she started, because her son, my grandson, had to do something for one of the things for college applications and so forth. She said, well, we're going to do this Meal on Wheels. And anyways, my daughter is still doing it. But that looks good on your thing. So that's the relationship part of it. There's a technical part when people are looking at, and but then the relationship, because they want someone that's going to come in and be able to work with others and be, for the most part. So anyways, that's something to consider.
Okay, we had some questions, back there in the back.
Hi, I'm Claire. This is a question mainly for Sandy, but also just anyone with federal government experience. I'm really interested in jobs with the Forest Service and the USGS. And I know that from what I've heard, USA Jobs, the federal application process is really different from maybe like more the private sector. So any advice on like how to keep an eye for job openings on USA Jobs, and like general resume, how do you format your federal resume, that kind of stuff.
Right. Your federal resume doesn't have to be different than any other resume. And I know sitting inside USGS, I can, sign up for, create an account in USA Jobs, as you can, upload your resume, have things ready to go, right? And then I can monitor, I can check, I want to be notified when jobs of this category or of this region or these grade levels come up. I think you can do that as someone from the outside looking in. I know that I can. And what I used to do mid-career, honestly, is I would always be in there and I'd say, I want to see any job that's maybe GS 12 or 13 or above. I wasn't even looking. I just wanted to know, where the turnover was, who the new people were. I just monitor the environment. But so I don't think your resume has to be unique in a unique format. And sometimes some of the resumes that we get that don't follow a standard federal format, because I'll give you a suggestion, catch your eye. A cover letter is very nice to have. It is not required. When I'm looking to hire, if I don't know the person, because it's not someone coming in, from USGS, another USGS office, that cover letter is important.
Communication is important.
The
Even if it's a
communication.
follow-up email, cover letter,
Yeah,
getting
that's
back,
really
again,
important.
the ability to express yourself concisely. Writing skills are very important, and they mean a lot. It's hard to gauge. You don't always know how you're going to do, and maybe that's not your forte early on, especially, and you evolve into that. And
As I said, a follow-up's important, because I hate to say it, but, hiring can be very slow with the federal government. We advertise positions before Christmas. We're still interviewing. And, oftentimes by the time we get through this, big human resource process, people have moved on or have lost interest. So if you, every once in a while, ping us and say, I'm still interested, where are you at? Your name gets repeated and we recognize you when we go to interview, right? So that's something that communication, that's really good.
we've hired 14 people in the last 2 years in my company. We've lost 5. So I've been through this a lot recently and talked to a ton of OSU students. And I think overall, you guys are coming out with a good foundation. And that's all we're looking for, is a foundation. As you get into a graduate program, then you're going to have a little more specialization, obviously. And if it takes an extra semester, or if you need to take a summer semester to add a couple classes to fill your curriculum, you've got, unfortunately or fortunately, you've got the arts and sciences requirements on top of your program requirements that sometimes can, challenge you for time and course availability. Those kind of things mean a lot to us, that you're trying to get as much as you can into your fundamental, your training like that. And then we can, that shows initiative. It means a lot. If I had to pick I just wanted to say this because I got the chance now, I have the floor, but if I had to pick the perfect program, and it doesn't mean that you have to have this program as an undergrad, I would go the geological sciences track with the water certificate. And those are the kinds of things, the hydrogeology certificate. That to me, from what I'm looking for, is a perfect fit for an undergrad, for a bachelor's degree. But again, probably a third of the people I hire actually check all those boxes. So it's not that it's, a requirement. So you think about, but if you want to go another track, you didn't want to do hydro, you still have sort of that foundation and all those pieces still fit together. Sometimes if you take the water track, which is a great track, and it's still very valuable to us, you don't get some of the things that you get in the fundamental geology track. And some that we've hired here recently have gone back and filled some of those gaps or added without even doing a certificate. And they say, hey, I want to go to field camp. I want to add that to my resume. So they take structural geology, even though they're in the water track, right? Mm-hmm. And then I'd say the same thing for graduate students. A lot of graduate students come in and maybe they didn't go to field camp, as an undergrad. Historically, back in the day, if you come to Ohio State in a master's program and you haven't been to field camp, you're going to field camp, and that would be a requirement to get through your master's program. And so it doesn't have to be field camp, but if there's something that you're short on, another young man I hired here recently had an undergrad in environmental engineering, did a master's program in hydro and surface water, groundwater interactions, and he's a little short on some of the things that he could have had as his foundation for fundamental geology. Still great. He's excelling, going crazy, doing everything we can ask of him. But those are, if in a perfect world, you'd have filled some of those gaps. So you think about some of those kind of things, and nothing is a disqualifier. If you're short on one thing or another, so don't think of it that way. Just if you have the opportunity, I encourage you to try to take advantage of it.
Yes.
I got a question more so for Claire. I switched majors between my sophomore and junior year, so a lot of the classes I've taken a year later than typical. And I'm wanting to I'm wanting to do grad school, but it seems like with each new class I take, I find something else more interesting. So I was just wondering if there were any tips you had during grad school that would help me kind of hone in on what I actually want to do, because there's a lot of things that really interest me, but I'm not sure how I could lump them all together, if that's even possible.
So I think first it depends on whether you're looking at a master's program or PhD program first. And in general, I would always, especially in geology, recommend a master's, because it does give you a chance to get a little deeper into something, into one topic. And then you can always keep going, or you can get a job from there. But then also, I'll start with actually when I was looking at grad school in undergrad, I think the grad programs that I applied to were in 3 or 4 different disciplines. So I also didn't know yet what I wanted to do, and I didn't stick with structure, so clearly I still didn't really know. So I applied to a couple different schools, and made sure to reach out to faculty that I was interested in working with, and I got some recommendations from faculty here about who they knew at different schools who might be good to work with. And I think I had 3-ish different disciplines that I was kind of looking at. And the decision ended up coming down to the combination of discipline, faculty advisor, and program. And so I think that if you're really not sure what you want to do and a couple things sound interesting, then any of those is probably fine. I doubt that you'll regret the path that you take, as long as it's something that interests you, like one of your options. But then the combination of a good program can get you really far because that has a lot more resources. A good grad program has, a lot more recruiters coming to campus and faculty that have good collaborations. A good advisor is also very important because they're going to shape your career a lot. And if you can find both of those things in a discipline you're interested in, that's a great combination. And that combination of things I think is more important than just a project you're interested in. If it's with a faculty advisor who's already overworked with a whole ton of students, or at a department that doesn't have as many resources, you're really looking for the combination, and then that'll help you jump off from there, and you can always switch disciplines again later.
Thank you.
Yes.
I have a question pertaining to like degree level and experience, because I know personally, like as an undergrad, I'm kind of, contemplating whether or not to go to grad school or maybe get experience first. And even on the panel today, I've heard like, some people don't hire PhDs, or some others, like, when you do hire different degree levels, you're, certain, like a bachelor's degree would do more exploration, and a master's degree would do more leadership, and a PhD would do more research. And I guess my question is, like, it sounds like a lot of you guys have had different levels of experience, especially like Claire, after graduating with a bachelor's, doing some work, and then going for a master's, and then going for a PhD. Have you guys ever maybe applied for a job and maybe you found yourself overqualified or underqualified, and what did you do in response to that?
So I haven't had that exact thing happen, but I guess just in general on like deciding what education level to aim for and where that'll get you. I think that for the most part in geology and earth sciences, a master's is very helpful. It'll get you more options for jobs. A master's generally, you guys can speak to this, a master's probably doesn't overqualify you for very many positions. Like most places that hire bachelors will also hire masters, and it's a little bit different jobs. It's really good experience, and it helps you figure out what to do next. And I also, in my experience and with all the people that I've known going through different levels of grad school and education and career, my recommendation is always to not do a PhD until you're very sure that you want to do not only a PhD, but that what you want to do as a career requires the PhD. So a PhD is where like you can do it and then you can get jobs that don't necessarily require it. It won't necessarily overqualify you, but why go through that if you don't need it? It's a lot. And the people that I've seen, just that I know personally, who have struggled the most through a PhD specifically, just because it's very long, very demanding, are people who didn't have a really good personal reason for being there. And the people who do have really solid personal reasons, whether it's achievement or a specific career path, I think every PhD student gets to a point where they're like, okay, why am I doing this to myself? And if you don't have a good answer for that, it's a lot harder to keep going. But a master's is always good.
Yeah, I want to build on that. After my 4 years at school, I wasn't even thinking about graduate school. I said, no way, I'm done studying and so forth. But I was fortunate to get a job at the National Geological Survey, and I loved it. But I needed to apply something. I got tired of just doing it for the sake of doing it. That's what you're doing in your classes. I wanted to see what's happening. And so the National Geological Survey gave me that opportunity. And then it's on-the-job training. In other words, I knew the book stuff, but you didn't really know how you implemented it. The implementation between a book and the implementation is a big difference. So that was a very thing. I needed that work and feel good about that. Then I got that opportunity because they were training people. And then they said, oh, well, we need people that have a higher degree. They needed master's things, and they didn't have them. That's why they sent a bunch of us back to school. It wasn't just me. NGS was sending 3 people back a year for several years because they needed that knowledge, but they're the ones that needed it. So that's how I got back and got my master's. And I could have gone back and got a PhD, but I was having too much fun, and I'm thinking, why do I need it? I'm at this job. No one's telling me not to do what I'm doing. And I kept growing, moving, going up, and I'm having so much fun. And as you said, I didn't need it to do my job. maybe I could have been in a slightly different position, but I ultimately became the director of the National Geodetic Survey. So apparently I didn't need to have the PhD. You have to really want that drive. Because I had a lot of my peers that did go back, came to Ohio State, got a PhD in geodesy and stuff. But I personally felt doing the job and working was more what I wanted to do. So it's a personal thing when you're there.
Let me add the consulting industry perspective to this. I hire one graduate degree, a master's degree for every 5 bachelor's degrees. And again, it gets back to the foundation. There's a lot of opportunity with the bachelor's degree out there. And, you know, it's a lifelong learning experience, right? So you're gonna get into a profession, you're gonna get into a company, and you're gonna keep learning. You're gonna be with you know, more experienced people. You're going to have a ton of exposure to a lot of different things. You know, if we had more time, I talked about how that might look down the consulting track, whether or not you're with an engineering firm or with your earth sciences firm, which is what we are, and you know, options and opportunities you have, some pros and cons, things like that. I'm happy to talk about that offline, you know, with anybody too. So it gets back for me looking to see what you've done, how you relate yourself, and what you want to do. You know, and we do hire a lot of people who think that maybe they want to go back to grad school at some point, but they want to test the industry and they go down that path. So nothing's final. We've paid for, you know, graduate programs. There have been some online programs even that we've supported with some staff, and so different ways to go about it. And it's that you don't have to decide now. Back to Dave's point and others, you can sort of evolve into those kind of decisions.
And I was going to really emphasize that lifelong learning as well. I have a master's degree, but I was getting into numerical modeling, and I just went back and took classes, right? I didn't go back for another degree. I took some additional math classes, and I took, you know, a few classes that would help me specifically on what the projects were that I was working on. So, you know, again, lifelong learning. You can always take a class here or there. Sometimes your office or company will pay for those individual classes.
I'm afraid we're going to have to wrap it up here. We've run out of time. I think there's lunch available outside, so you're all welcome to grab a sandwich. And so I'd like to thank the panel for their great discussions here this morning, and I hope you'll join me with a round of applause.